talking about the carbon cycle. First, let's cover what the carbon cycle is. The carbon cycle is just nature's way of taking the existing carbon in the atmosphere or the ground and repurposing it so that other organisms can use that carbon again and again. Actually, two different carbon cycles, the fast carbon cycle and the slow carbon cycle. In the slow carbon cycle, it can take 1 to 200 million years of tectonic activity and chemical reactions to get the carbon from the oceans to the atmosphere to rocks. But for this presentation, we're just going to be looking at the fast carbon cycle. Before we get into all the nitty-gritty details of the carbon cycle, we'll just look at this basic overview of it. So in step 1, carbon dioxide gets into the atmosphere, and then in step 2, through the process of photosynthesis, that carbon dioxide gets to the plants. Animals eat those plants, and then when those animals die, that carbon from their bodies goes back to the soil or to the atmosphere, and then again the plants use that carbon. Let's take a closer look now at step 1. In step 1, carbon dioxide emissions enter the atmosphere. One of the ways this happens is through the process of cellular respiration. This happens in all living organisms. That's the way they take in oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. Another way they get into the air is when fossil fuels are burned. One of the really common ways this happens is in cars, and CO2 is a byproduct of that reaction. When organisms decompose, CO2 will also be released into the atmosphere. And the formula that helps us understand that a little better is CH2O plus O2 equals CO2 plus H2O plus energy. That's a bit of a mouthful, but just sugar plus oxygen equals carbon dioxide plus hydrogen plus energy. This formula is used in all of the processes we're getting into the atmosphere, but for this specific kind of decomposition, it's called aerobic decomposition because oxygen is used in the process. Now that the carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere, we want to just refresh ourselves on how carbon dioxide fits in with photosynthesis. So during photosynthesis, as you probably remember, the plants absorb sunlight and carbon dioxide. They use all these nutrients to form sugar, which then they use to survive. So we see a really similar process in this step, as once the carbon dioxide gets into the plant, it's mixed with water and used where excess carbon is stored. The formula here is CO2 plus H2O plus energy equals CH2O plus O2. So it's just the reverse of what we saw earlier. It's carbon dioxide plus hydrogen plus energy equals sugar plus oxygen. CO2 is obviously coming from the air, the hydrogen is coming from the roots, and the sunlight is being absorbed by the leaves. So now that the carbon dioxide is in the plant, we need to get it to the animal. So animals will eat the plants that the carbon is stored in, and then some of that carbon will be given off from their bodies when they exhale, and some of it will be stored in their tissues, similar to the plant. Now we need to take the carbon from the animal's bodies and return it to the earth. So while the animal is still alive, the carbon will leave its body through waste, but once the animal dies, the carbon will go back to the earth through one of two ways. One of them is aerobic decomposition, like we mentioned earlier. As the body is naturally decaying, the carbon in the tissues will go back to the soil. But another way the carbon will come off the body is in the fumes. If you ever smelled a rotting corpse, you know there are gases that come off the body. One of those gases is the CO2. You can't actually smell it though, as it's a very small amount. So now we have carbon that's in the air and the ground, and the plants can use it. They'll either get it from the atmosphere using photosynthesis, and that's their main source of getting carbon, or they'll get a small amment that they actually suck up through their roots. So the final thing we're going to talk about today are the different branches of the carbon cycle. So for example, even though the main carbon cycle that I just showed you is pretty large, you could have a cycle just between steps 1 and 2. As the cow exhales and the plant uses that carbon dioxide, they'll give oxygen, and that can keep going and could sustain a small group with that carbon. Also, the human impact on the carbon cycle. For example, if we drive our cars more frequently and we release more CO2 into the air, then our greenhouse gas levels will rise, and that could affect how the steps work. Sometimes steps are skipped or they go in a different order. All in all though, the carbon cycle is essential to sustaining life on Earth because carbon is a building block of life. Without it, life couldn't continue.